Zachary Page, working with Colby here with the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships and CERTS team today, Clean Energy Resource. Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships, we work with the rural greater Minnesota and the regions. Welcome to Shelf Life. Yeah, this is like kind of like an add-on. We had, I think it was 8 parts, and so you could look them up with the website link, and we have recorded all the videos. We did sessions on finance management, grocery loan basics, grocery grants. So that's a good one with all the grants that are out there. Transition, if you're transitioning out of your store. We also have one on local foods and marketing and co-op. So yeah, check out the resource center here for the Shelf Life webinar series, and also there's links to even more resources for grocery stores on there. And yeah, we're working with the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships. We work in all the regions, and yeah, that's the link for the resource center. And yeah, so this is like the last bonus round of the Shelf Life, and so yeah, we're lucky enough to be hosting the National Grocery Summit in May, and we'll be getting some postcards soon, some more info about that. So it's going to be great. We're going to have a lot of networking opportunities, touring facilities and grocery stores, hearing about strategy, more grants, and an update on the clean energy resources available as well. But without further ado, I'll pass it on to Colby today, and we'll be talking about energy efficiency in grocery stores and opportunities.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Colby Boz. I work with CERTS as the Business Renewable Energy Consultant. And so I'm just supporting small businesses and farms and other organizations across the state that want to pursue clean energy projects. And that's part of CERT's broader mission of connecting individuals and their communities to resources they need to identify and implement community-based clean energy projects. And so we're just a partnership that tries to bring people together and find resources and ways to help you navigate what can be a very complicated and confusing process as far as what the options are. And then, yeah, our approach is we have regional coordinators all around the state and try to meet people where they're at, both geographically, but also just kind of where you're at in your journey of your business and your situation, what sort of project might be best fit your reality. And then trying to convert what we learn and what you can learn into actual action and putting projects forward, be that energy efficiency improvements or solar are the main things we're going to be talking about today. And then we really try to make sure that everyone's included in this clean energy journey. The state has some pretty ambitious goals, and so we really want to be a part of making sure that everyone who wants to be participating in that is able to do that. This just shows you kind of our different regions, and so we have a coordinator in each region to provide that kind of boots on the ground and someone who's more connected and integrated at that level. And then some folks like me and Pete, who you'll hear from a little bit later, work statewide and kind of support those regional coordinators. So I just wanted to kind of frame our conversation today with like, well, how do we even think about this approach of like, oh, we want to do a clean energy project. We want to kind of have some improvements for our business, for our rural grocery store. How do we start that process? How do we navigate that process? And there's kind of 5 main steps that I've come to observe through my work. And one of the most important steps is that step 1 that I feel like oftentimes people miss, where you're like, oh, you hear about some cool new technology. And you really want to start by like, well, what are your actual goals? What are your priorities? What are you trying to do with this clean energy journey? And then obviously you have to study and learn about kind of what your current situation is, and then use that learning to plan a project, and then finally figure out, well, how are we going to do that project? How are we going to pay for that project? And then the grand finale, which often at that point you've got everything pretty well sorted, but there can be some hiccups that come in that implementation phase as far as actually like getting the solar installed, getting the air source heat pumps installed, or kind of making those energy efficiency improvements. So let's start with Well, what are your goals? What are your priorities as you look to a clean energy project? There are a lot of different ways that you could decide to kind of pursue a project. And figuring that out, or at least figuring out an initial idea of what your priorities are early in the process, can be really helpful because it can inform small and big decisions as that goes. As far as, is your primary goal to save money? That's going to potentially change what type of project you pursue or how you prioritize designing that project. Relative to, like, oh, if it's a green image, then maybe it's important for you to have the solar panels on the ground and not on the roof or in some other way where they're very visible. It's like different sort of things are going to influence how the project gets shaped. And so then, well, we got to do the study part. How do you get to know your energy usage? How do you figure out, like, what is that low hanging fruit? What is that best opportunity for you and your business and your situation? To do that, we're going to go over a little bit of just kind of some basic understanding of, like, well, how do you figure out and collect that sort of information? So in the next slide, we'll talk about the idea of kilowatts versus kilowatt hours. If you're dealing with heating systems or other sort of like energy efficiency stuff, sometimes you'll talk about things in BTUs or tons. But in the electricity space, and there's easy conversions between BTUs and kilowatts, we're mostly talking about kilowatts and kilowatt hours. And kilowatts is kind of the rate at which energy is consumed or produced. And so it's like kind of how fast your car is going, versus kilowatt hours is how much, the quantity of energy. So like the odometer, or for something like a light bulb, kind of how much energy does it use in a day. In the next slide, we'll look at, this is an example of an energy bill from a utility up in my area. And this is just to give you an idea of, well, how do we figure out what our energy usage is, or where are those opportunities? And the first place to start is usually your utility bill. And so if we click through, there's actually three little arrows that pop up. And so understanding your utility bill is a really important piece of the learning journey, as far as looking at that top part of what is your actual energy usage. And so utility bills will all look a little different, but they'll always have somewhere where they kind of show the early readings, the later readings, and kind of how many kilowatt hours, what we just talked about, you used, and sometimes with different meters and different types of price for those different meters. And then they'll also have kind of the different rates. They can obviously get to be much longer list than this, but there's usually a base kind of cost per kilowatt hour. Right now, I think the average is up to about 14 or 15 cents per kilowatt hour in Minnesota. But then there'll be other kind of add-ons and charges, some that are tied to the kilowatt hour and some that are kind of percentage rates like the taxes, or like flat rates like service charges that are just kind of a fixed fee to be connected. And some that won't be super clear as to whether they're based on the kilowatt hours or not. And that's one of those kind of things where when certs kind of helps a business explore their options, one of the things we'll do is like call the utility and like help to decipher that utility bill, and like, well, what are the parts of the bill that would be impacted by an energy efficiency project or a solar installation. Another thing that's on most but not all bills is a lovely graph of your energy usage over the past 12 months. And so that can be a really good and valuable way to kind of get a high level analysis of, like, oh, when am I using the most energy? Or are there like unusual spikes? Or I'm using a lot more this year than last year. And like that can help inform of, like, oh, I use a lot in the winter for heating. Maybe heating is going to be a project that would have a real good benefit to focus on. Oh, which actually is talking about the next slide. Yeah, so this one just looks at kind of one of the ways you can look at that chart of your energy usage over the year and kind of apply other things you know about your business to be like, oh, wait, there's this big spike here from LED lights for non, in this case, non-LED lights for kind of holiday lighting, or like, oh, it got really warm in these months, so the air conditioner was running a lot more, or like an emergency situation where the heater went out and you had to use electric heaters. Those things use a lot of electricity. Or you add an electric vehicle to your fleet, and so we're kind of doing more charging from that. And so doing that initial bill analysis is a great place to start and costs you nothing other than a little bit of time to kind of look at those. And then the other way is to actually do an energy audit. And it's like that's where you actually would kind of usually bring a professional in and can do a variety of kind of how in depth they go. RETAP is one organization that works, and it's an acronym that works across the state supporting businesses that want to do really in depth energy audits. And they are free from RETAP, but you can also usually get one through your utility or from someone local to your community. And you can do it yourself, although it's going to be somewhat more limited in kind of the depth of nuance and kind of analysis as far as bringing in that technical expertise. If you are doing it yourself, though, with this next slide, some of the basic things you can do that are low-hanging fruit is just looking at labels on devices. And so most devices will have something like this energy guide that'll show you the estimated yearly kilowatt hours, energy usage, um, the estimated yearly operating cost isn't necessarily that valuable unless if you know the standards and assumptions they're using to calculate that, but the kilowatt hours is a great way to kind of compare that to something that you might be looking to purchase, or comparing that to like looking online of like, oh, what is a normal appliance of this type use? And then on different labels, like you might see one that looks more like the food nutrition label on something like light bulbs, or just on most electronics, somewhere on it, they will have, and yeah, they will have, there are also arrows on this one. Great, cool. So if you click through, there's some more arrows that point out where on like an electronic appliance, it'll say its voltage, its hertz. That's all going to be kind of the same for the United States, but also say its wattage or sometimes an amperage rating. And that can be used to be like, oh, how much power is this thing going to use? On electronics, it often will be the max power it will use. And so that doesn't necessarily mean it uses that power all the time or in normal operations. And so that's where using a watt meter or other devices to actually like plug it into that and get that record of how much power does this thing use during our normal operations. And there's some libraries that will even lend out watt meters and other tools to help do that analysis for yourself. And so this last slide of this section here, when you're looking at, well, like, well, what are the options? What are the different ways that we could explore a project? Electrification is one of the best ways to improve the efficiency of things because most fuel-based ways of powering things have a lot of waste in the form of heat or other externalities that electric is just able to be more efficient. And that's, I mean, kind of the whole idea of how hybrid cars work is using an electric motor to produce electric or a gas motor to produce electricity to then run the car is actually more efficient in some cases. And so, and then it's even better now where we have fully electric vehicles and fully electric tools of a variety of types even in a grocery store, looking at tools you use in the store or looking at if you do deliveries or how you receive goods, there might be some opportunities for electrifying things that have previously been fuel-based. And well, depending on what you're trying to electrify, the cost savings may or may not be large. The actual like BTU savings is usually pretty significant as far as energy efficiency terminology. So that was kind of that high level of like, well, okay, how do we study the problem? How do we kind of decide and explore what sort of thing we want to do? Then we have to plan a project. There's a few different words on this slide of like some of the different options you might want to explore, but I almost always want to start with efficiency first. And so in the next slide, we talk about kind of just what are some of those basic low-hanging fruit things that you can do for efficiency, because you're almost always going to save a lot more money by spending $1 on some efficiency improvements because that's that much less solar you have to get down the road or that much less electricity you have to buy on an ongoing basis. And so it could be something as simple as just swapping out lights to LED. Motors and fans use a lot of power, and that's definitely something that I know are used a lot in grocery store situations. Refrigeration, that's a huge use of power. And so figuring out what the options are for that or what the different things that are impacting your bill and your energy usage is the best place to start. And then in the next slide, really like if efficiency starts with just taking care of your equipment. It's amazing how inefficient equipment can be when it's not actually being maintained. And so maybe that's you doing the maintenance yourself. Maybe that's having a maintenance contract as part of installing some new piece of equipment. Um, Maybe it's just actually like looking at the manuals on what is the efficient kind of level of heat to set things at. One of the things with air source heat pumps is they have a different sort of heating pattern, so they're most efficient when they're running all the time. And so kind of all those different considerations can be factored in. And so just something as simple as like having a schedule and having a routine checking and cleaning of filters, of kind of cooling fins on indoor or outdoor units, can dramatically increase the overall efficiency and effectiveness of equipment, particularly cooling and heating equipment. And so I want to talk a little bit about heating pumps, air source heat pumps. You're probably pretty familiar with them as far as air conditioners and the refrigerators that are very commonplace in grocery stores. And those are actually heat pumps. And so basically, this is an idea of just taking that same technology of using a refrigerant to move heat from one place to another rather than create heat, and then applying that to space heating, applying that to all these environments that we're in where the technology has evolved a lot where it can work in really cold climates. And so even if it's really cold outside, it's still able to pull heat from that for the building, or it's still able to kind of pull heat from those cold spaces. And then one of the things that I find really enjoyable, but can be hard to kind of put into practice is what are the ways where, oh, if I'm cooling a bunch of refrigerators, can I recover that heat into a space where that I want to keep warm in the winter? It's like that's kind of those thermal savings of like, are there ways where you can design these systems intelligently to try and take advantage of natural conditions, like root cellars used for storage, or ways that you can take advantage of waste heat from one thing actually becoming a benefit in other situations. But if you're using cold climate air source heat pumps for heating, it is a very viable option, even in our cold northern Minnesota or even southern Minnesota in particular situations. And there can be really dramatic savings, especially if you run on propane or electric resistive heat currently. And so this is kind of what a standard kind of mini split type heat pump looks like. In the commercial setting, you're probably less likely to use these, although these types of heating and cooling are very commonplace around the world. I've been in restaurants where they literally had like one of these over every table. That was kind of interesting. But there's kind of the different way of either doing that outside unit, one big outside unit with lots of indoor units, or kind of one big outdoor unit, and then if you have an air handling system, just feed into that. And so like both are very viable options and can be 200 to 300% efficient because they're doing that moving of a heat rather than making of heat. And then with the next slide, we'll shift to solar. And so I talk about air source heat pumps and solar not because they're the only things you can do, but because they're some of the biggest things you can do that can really make dramatic impacts and have various incentives and mechanisms to help fund projects. And so when you're looking at solar, one of the things you want to think about is how does the system integrate to my current electrical needs? And part of that is like most solar systems are going to be grid tied, like you're already using electricity from the grid. But then there's also the option of including batteries as backup. And so, especially in a rural grocery store setting, you have refrigeration, you have valuable product in that refrigeration that if there's a power outage in your area, that's a real big risk of lost product. And so that's where adding storage to your system, either to run the whole place or more likely just adding some battery storage to just keep the refrigeration or other critical systems running during a power outage could really be a significant advantage to kind of having a solar system because that solar could then tie directly into those batteries and cause them to be resilient for much longer. Because then if it's sunny, you keep having those batteries be able to run for if there is an extended power outage rather than just protecting from a shorter power outage. And there are some incentives in Minnesota right now for adding storage to a solar system that you already have or a solar system that you're installing. And so some basic questions about solar. Um, do you have a place that has good sun? Do you have a south-facing roof? Do you have a flat roof? Do you have a angled roof? Are there a lot of obstructions on that roof? Um, you can also put it on the ground. Do you own your building? That's kind of one of those big factors that can determine whether solar is a project you can take on or not. And so definitely like working with certs or working with a solar installer to get a quote or kind of get some of that basic analysis done can be super valuable, as well as the bill analysis and feeding off of that that's been done earlier in your process as far as like how big of a solar system you'd want and how would it impact your energy usage. And then the next slide, I just like this slide because people think like, oh, it's so gray, it's so dark here, especially this time of year. Like, yes, this time of year is the lowest production months of our solar production cycle in Minnesota, but on average, we actually have really good sun and a similar amount of production capacity as some parts of Florida. And so Minnesota is actually a really good place to have solar, partly because of our cold climate. And so solar panels are actually more efficient when they're cold. And so that's another reason to maybe put them on the ground, which is where this next slide has some pictures of lovely ground mount solar. Especially if you're a grocery store, I imagine you probably have some rooftop space. But if you don't, or if you would rather put them on the ground in your parking lot or some other open space nearby, ground mount provides several different advantages as far as less heat buildup from that roof heat, but then also the ability to potentially like brush the snow off of them in the winter to get kind of increase your production some then, or have them at a more optimum angle, either kind of facing directly south, not whatever your roof is facing, or more kind of up and down angle as far as that optimal 35 degrees to get the best sun exposure. So now I will hand it off to Pete to talk about grants and financing.
Thank you, Colby. Grants and financing. So if you forget everything that I say over the next 5 to 10 minutes or so, or maybe 6 months from now, 9 months from now, you're thinking, what did that CERTS guy, that clean energy resource guy, he said something about a grant or a loan program. What was that about again? You can learn about what I'm talking about right on our website. Pay for your projects tool, and it is super slick. Gosh, it's almost like a chat GPT for finding grants and loan programs. Just say all you have to do is indicate what your business is, or what your project is, energy efficiency, solar. Hit OK, and it'll pull up all of the different grants, different loan programs that you are likely eligible for. So check that out. Pay for your projects. Next slide, please. So as Colby touched on, really, whenever my phone rings or an email comes in, and it's a business who is interested in one of these projects, my first word of advice is to contact your utility. Learn what sort of rebates they may have, learn what sort of incentives they may have, or programs that they may have to help you with the project that you're interested in. It's um, it's amazing, as Colby touched on, and as you are more aware than anybody. I just saw this stat not too long ago. Commercial refrigeration accounts for 20% of energy use, commercial energy use, and as much as 70%, that refrigeration, 70% in grocery stores. And I went on Otter Tail Power's just a rebate webpage today just to get a sense of what sort of rebates they provide. And it is pretty significant and a pretty healthy rebate for a wide variety of things, including refrigeration. So that's always my first word of advice is pick up the phone, go online and see what sort of rebates or incentives your local utility has. All right. Well, if it's a solar project you're interested in, there is, for the time being, a tax credit that commercial entities and homeowners for a little while, for a few more weeks here, can tap into. But commercial entities can tap into the clean electricity investment tax credit. It's a pretty healthy tax credit, 30% for projects that you would be interested in, project sizes that you'd be interested in. Potentially even more. There's these things called adders. So if you're located in certain areas or utilize made in America components, that 30% could be significantly more. It could be 40%, 50%, even potentially more. Those tax credits are going by the wayside. And so if this is a project that you are thinking about, a project that you definitely are intending to do, then time is of the essence here. These commercial tax credits um, uh, expire in the in in the year ahead. You really need to get your project going in the year ahead. So we can help you. Obviously, consult your tax advisor. I should say that at the beginning of every presentation I give. To consult your tax advisor, but certs can help you uh, with these with these projects as well, and give you some general guidance on tax credits. Next slide, please. Let's talk about grants. And here is a very popular one, Rural Energy for America program, or REAP. REAP grants available for much of Minnesota, any community that's 50,000 population or smaller. And so there's been tons of interest in this. Tons of rural businesses and farmers have tapped into REAP grants and REAP loans as well. It was Colby. Now I'm looking at your expertise here. It was up to 50% in the last couple of years, but now it has dropped back down. It was 25% grant, then one went up to 50%, and now I believe it's dropped back down to 25% grant, which is still a very healthy grant. And of course, you can combine it with other loan programs. You can combine it with utility rebates, and that really helps the return on investment for these projects. You know, I was going to mention we've got a great case study, and I'll drop it into the chat for a grocery store in Spring Grove that used REAP financing or a REAP grant a few years back. Red's IGA. They used this very healthy grant to install some glass doors on their coolers. And they're saving, and this was several years ago, so it's probably even more now, but they were saving $500 a month thanks to these glass doors. And these REAP projects can be used for renewable energy, for solar, for heating and cooling, insulation, lighting, refrigeration, of course, doors, windows, any number of things, energy efficiency things in your store. So that's definitely worth checking out. All right. This is not a grant. This is a loan, but it's worth exploring as well. Property assessed clean energy, or PACE financing. This is an interesting one. It's a way for businesses to get 100% financing for their energy efficiency or their renewable project. And then the loan is paid off as an assessment on your property tax bill. So you pay your property tax bill twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. You'll see on your property tax bill the amount you owe for property taxes to your city, county, school, etc. And then you'll also see an assessment, a line item that helps pay back the loan that you receive for your project. And these are really growing in popularity because they're cash flow positive. You have to have an energy audit as part of these projects. So that energy audit, as Colby was saying, will show if you do lighting improvements or change out these motors or put these doors on these freezers, you'll save $1,000 a year, for example. The PACE assessment will always be lower than your annual savings. So in this example, you save $1,000 a year. That PACE assessment would be $700, for example. So it's cash flow positive from day one, and they're great for energy efficiency projects, but I think they're even better for solar projects because you don't make your first payment. This is the case for energy efficiency or renewable project. You don't make your first payment until May of the following year. So say you do a solar project, the beginning of November 2025, you get a PACE loan to do that. You make your first payment May of 2026. And in between that time, you can claim a federal tax credit of 30% or potentially higher. And that's an amazing benefit and very helpful with return on investment. These are typically 10-year loans, 10-year term, and the interest rate is right around 5% fixed. 10 years fixed. The term of the loan can be up to 30 years, but typically we see 10 years. So it's not available right at the moment all across the state, but it's a good chunk of the state. There are some counties that have that doesn't have PACE available. I would say if you are located in a county, say in that far northwest part of the state or parts in the central part of the state that do not have PACE financing yet, the best way to get that county to enact PACE financing is to have a project happen on Main Street there. So don't let that hold you back. This says about 400 projects, but I think now we've exceeded 500 projects, and so the blue dots are where there has been PACE projects that have happened through one of two entities that provides these types of loans. The blue dots are the St. Paul Port Authority's program, which they call MinPACE. And then there is a group of 18 counties in the southwest part of the state called the Rural Minnesota Energy Board. And they have their own PACE program, and those projects are in yellow. And so Rural Minnesota Energy Board only operates in the southwest part of the state, and MinPACE operates in almost all of the rest of the state. We got some great QR codes, by the way, for these slides, so you can go right to, if you're interested, hold up your smartphone and go right to finding more information about these different initiatives. I will tell you, doing a little poking around for this presentation this afternoon, there's just a ton of grants and loans that are available. Some of of the grants, like the one that you may be familiar with, formerly known as the Good Food Access Program, now known as Fridge. Love that name. Food Retail Improvement and Development Grant Program. That's a statewide grant. And then some of these other grants are more location specific. So for example, the Business Energy Retrofit Grant is available for businesses in the Arrowhead in the Iron Range area. And then this other grant program with a similar name, Business Energy Efficiency Grant Program, that's a statewide program through the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. And then in the central part of the state, through the Headwaters RDC, they have their own energy grant program. And then don't forget about CERTs, good old clean energy resource teams. We've got our own grant program, and we've funded grocery stores throughout the years. Timing isn't great because our deadline just passed a few weeks ago now. But these are projects, $5,000 to $10,000 grants, roughly, for community-based clean energy projects, including grocery stores. And then, of course, there's other loans that are available for energy efficiency projects. CEE has a great loan program called One Stop Efficiency Shop Commercial Energy Loan. That's Center for Energy and Environment. One Stop Efficiency Shop Commercial Energy Loan, very competitive loan program. And then, especially for businesses in the Twin Cities region, there are some cities that provide grants and cost sharing programs for businesses in their area. And this, again, is all spelled out on our CERT's Pay for Your Project website. Getting towards the end here, I just wanted to say, one of the things that we do is technical assistance. We clean energy resource teams, and we love to help get these projects over the finish line. And then we love to tell stories about them. So if you are doing a project of this type and you'd like the world to know about it, we'd love to help you with that. And certainly we share a lot of stories through our newsletter, which is, we must have 10, 15,000 people subscribed to our newsletter. So you can learn. It's a great way for you to learn about what similar businesses are doing for energy efficiency and renewables. That's a wrap. That's me on the left side, and Colby, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you. And Colby, as I'm thinking about it, you may want to mention if anybody's interested in solar, they can get a site assessment from you. Am I right about that?
But yeah, one of the things that CERTS does is provide one-on-one consultation and support for businesses that want to pursue a clean energy project. And so if you reach out to me, we can usually the easiest way is to just kind of schedule an appointment, and we have a Zoom meeting and just talk through your situation, kind of talk through those 5 different stages of the project and what might fit you. And then we can do solar site assessments if you're wanting to pursue solar, where we can either review a bid you got from a solar installer or actually do the full financial modeling on our own. And that can be really valuable because, especially in rural Minnesota, it can be hard to get multiple competing bids. And so CERTS is not trying to sell you anything and can kind of look that over and make sure it looks good and provide kind of any commentary or follow-up questions you might want to explore with installer.
You charge a grand total of $0 for this service. Am I right about that?
Mm-hmm. It's a great price. Don't even ask for your credit card to have it on file so we can like sketchily start charging it later, anything. No shenanigans like that. So we're just here wanting to help reduce barriers to access for folks that want to pursue a clean energy project. And so be that the solar site assessment or just be that kind of other technical support or connecting you to resources and things like that. So yeah, please reach out and we'd love to chat. Practicing the whole schoolroom teacher strategy of give a full 30 seconds, see if anyone actually thinks of any questions when given enough time. But yeah, I mean, I think if folks don't have any questions, then I don't know. I'm always happy when a meeting ends 10 minutes early and I get a little bit of my life back. So we can, yeah, wrap stuff up. But definitely, please reach out. Yeah, our contact info was in the slide, but we'll also send it in a follow-up email. And yeah,
Yeah.
would love to connect with folks and see
We'll
what
get
sort
this
of projects might work for you.
and we'll get the recording up on the website, the Shelf Life, and then if you're part of Shelf Life and doing this as part of that, we'll have a season 2 next year. So stay tuned for that. It'll probably be in like February, but if you miss something on the recording here, that'll be the home up there is that Shelf Life page on the University of Minnesota extension.